Alrighty, and we are live today, folks. We are going to be attaching this bridge right here, this interesting mustache-shaped bridge. This is just a design of mine that I like to do, particularly on these really small parlor guitars. I think it looks sharp. It adds something to them. So if you guys are watching this live and you're in the chat, by the way, throw me a comment. Lets me know that everything's working, audio, video, everything's kind of smooth. Just let me know. And hey, let me know where you're listening from too, as well. And if you have any questions, well, as always, what I like to do here is like we're going to get started working on this. But as we go, if you guys want to discussion wise take this in a completely different direction, then hey, that's what this is all about. That's what we'll do. Okay. So I'm willing to go where you guys take me. All right. So sort of order of operations here. You can see I've already started this. I'm radiusing the mating surface of the bridge, which is very important. And then we're going to locate the bridge based off of its scale length. We need to very precisely locate this bridge so that later on when we cut our saddle slot, it'll end up right where we expect it to. And then lastly, of course, is the actual glue up procedure for the bridge, in which case we will be using a homemade Fox style bridge clamp. We'll talk about again in a little bit here. But first of all, let me hit this banner right here. That's cool things. StreamYard. Okay, great. There's the banner. First of all, if you like what I do and you get a little something out of the lessons that I teach, go to ericschaferguitars.com. There you will find the schedule of dates for the hands-on workshops. Yes, I teach classes here in the shop, 8-day classes where students build their own guitar in a professional atmosphere. We're not doing kit builds and things like other uh, places offer. This is a legitimate guitar building school. And also, at ericschaferguitars.com, if you can't make it out here for a workshop, you can find the online courses that I teach as well. So these are video courses. You get in the Building an OM acoustic course, you get 61 videos going through every single step of the process, from rough cutting your materials to finish. And lastly, we now have the tone wood shop, by the way, guys. So check that out. I sell tone woods now. There's a lot of Spessart oak, Wangi, Tasmanian blackwood. I think there's still some Claro walnut available there. Just a lot of really interesting stuff and things that you don't typically find elsewhere. Okay, I guess I should mention also I sell guitars. It's funny. I realized recently in my spiel, I never mentioned that anymore. So yeah, if any of you guys are players out there, maybe you're hobbyist builders, but you're also guitar players and you want a really sweet guitar like this one you see me working on here, ericschaferguitars.com. All right, so where are we? And let me check the chat. Okay, chat's kind of quiet. So I'm in the middle of sanding the blue surface for the bridge. So why am I doing this right over the top? It's because the top has the exact radius that I want. Now you might think um, that rather than doing it over the guitar itself, you could make a jig that would basically be like a reverse radius dish, right? Instead of a concave dish, you could have a convex dish that would be the same radius, and you could just sand off of that. But the real fact of the matter here is that this radius is not going to be the exact same radius as the dish that it was sanded in. Okay. In fact, it's always going to be a little bit flatter of a radius. And I'll explain why. Um, so you radius your braces and you radius the rims, right? So that when you glue everything up to the plates, the top and the back, the radius rims and the radius braces are going to pull those thin, pliable plates into submission to that radius, right? But even though the braces and the rims win, they sort of win the battle, tension, um, that plate still has an effect, however slight it is. And so it's actually wanting to pull everything flat ever so slightly. So, for example, this is a nominally a 30-foot radius for the top. If I were to measure this, and I don't need to, I don't really have anything to measure it anyway. But if I were to measure this, I would find that it is, in fact, not a 30-foot radius in actual practice here. It's probably like slightly higher of a radius, like a 31 or 32 or something like that. Again, that's just because the plates themselves have their own influence on the braces. Okay, so thankfully for you guys, I already did most of this sanding. There's a little bit of chalk still left over on this. I'll show you what I mean by chalk. Because when you start out, it's always a good idea to just chalk this thing up. I'll go ahead and do it again. But this is what I did in the beginning. Chalked it up so I can then sand until the chalk disappears. Now, this is 80 grit because in the beginning, I mean business. I'm going to then switch to 120. And because this is the bridge, this really is like the most critical glue joint on the whole guitar. It's going to accept a lot of tension from the strings. Um, I'm going to take this all down to 220 for the mating surface, just because I need that joint to be super tight. Okay, and the finer grit that you go for a glue surface, the better that joint's going to be. Essentially, you can picture it this way. So, what you have when you have 80 grit scratches is a series of valleys and mountains, right? So those grit scratches are basically the valleys. And if you have that on both pieces that are coming together, then those mountain peaks are actually going to push the pieces slightly on a sort of microscopic scale. It's going to push them slightly apart. By progressing through the finer grits, you're cutting down those mountain peaks and therefore bringing the two pieces ever so slightly closer together. So it does matter fine tuning out the grit. Although really the most important thing is that you get that shape just perfect. It's not going to matter how smooth the uh, the surface is if you don't have the radius right. That's the more important thing. Again, is why we're doing this right over the top. I like to do little circles here rather than back and forth, because back and forth there's a tendency to sort of cantilever. As I do this, there's a tendency to sort of clip the bridge as I go and not get as accurate of a sand. Also, it just feels a little more fatiguing. All right, let's take a look at this. Yep, still got that corner there. Let's check out the chat. In the chat, let me take my banner down. That's kind of in the way. The reason I have these little pieces of scrap wood here is because if you're sanding without those there, you'll find the radius on the back just makes this a little tippy. Since you're doing a lot of sanding, you might as well mm, make the most of your efforts by eliminating little vibrations. So this is a Wangi bridge, by the way. Wengi is an extraordinarily brittle wood. Ask me how I know. I get nasty Wengi splinters all the time. But brittleness is essentially what you're looking for in a good high Q material for guitar making. Meaning brittleness translates directly into getting more oscillations, more responsiveness out of your material. That's why we use things like Sitka spruce for guitar tops. Think of how brittle, you guys I'm sure have handled Sitka spruce before. If you bend that a little bit, it's so easy to snap it along a grain line. Okay, let's take a look at this. All right, guys, give me a. Oh, you guys are talking in the chat, but it's not showing me it. Oh, here it is. All right. Is the bridge windy? Yes, it is, actually. Just answered that. Do you have a weight you aim for on your bridges? No, I don't. A lot of guys do that. I know Brian Gallup is kind of, famously known for that, taking that approach. I think it's a good idea. I am just not, how do I put this? With a lot of my building practices, I'm just not as sort of left brain analytical. Um, I'm less of a, a control freak, I guess, in a way. I don't document too many things. And I know in the Luthery world, there's a lot of guys that do that as sort of like a best practice. And so I'm never going to say that that's a bad thing to do. I just find overthinking doesn't work well for me in particular. Okay. I think I'm just prone to it. So I've tried it before. I've tried like, um, I used to do like deflection tests on individual braces. Um, and it slows me down too much. I'd rather, I get used to the materials. I feel the materials. I bend and flex them and just get a sort of gut level sense of them. And I just keep going from there. Um, But hey, that's not a bad thing to do, especially when you're just getting started out, because you don't have a gut level sense of anything, right? So taking copious notes and weighing things and doing sorts of reflection tests and stuff like that when you're just getting started out is a good idea. I will say a lot of older luthiers who start out doing that eventually stop doing it simply because they've built up enough data in their hands from doing all those tests and handling the material that they no longer need to, constantly check the weight of this and that. They can more or less sense it. For example, if you have a billet of wood that you're cutting a whole bunch of bridges from, if you weigh several of the bridges and you get a pleasing result from that, you can pretty much rest assured that unless you notice something not or something strange on the other side of the billet, every single bridge on that billet is going to be within that same, close to same range. Sort of a long answer there. Let's see what you guys are saying. Working, parlor, acoustic, my guitar of choice. Okay, cool. So he likes parlors. Parlors are my favorite too, right? Only right now at the moment, just because I used to always play the OM and I love the OM, but I got so used to it that I just needed a switch up. So I started building these parlors, and they are just fun as hell to play. Partially just because of how they feel in your hands; they're so much smaller, um, and the scale length is so much shorter. But also just the snarky bite of a parlor guitar, it's not going to sound like a fuller bodied guitar, mellow and very evenly balanced. It's going to have more of this punchy, trebly um, projection to it. John Hall called my parlor guitars the Alabama Screamer. And I like that. That's what I mean. I think that says it all. The Alabama Screamer. That kind of describes the role of parlor guitar, or at least my parlor guitars. All right, let's check this out. We got to be getting there. Just a tad off of that corner right there. Okay. That's off the top. Yeah, this is a redwood top. This is abalone, not mother of pearl, but abalone. For the percling. The reason I do this mustache shaped bridge here is it's actually designed to the angles that are cut into this line up with the pattern of the X brace. They still go a little bit past, just a hair past the X brace. They don't meet right up to it. But that way you don't have this squared off end that is kind of tonally speaking pointless sticking out over there. So if you think about it, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. I know many of you are, but the bridge is really your last brace, the final brace on your bracing pattern. It just happens to be on the outside of the guitar rather than on the inside. So I've kind of more or less shaped it like a brace would be shaped if it was, being joined between those two X brace arms. That's kind of a cool swept back. Alrighty. All right. There's a tad just kind of hiding right off the edge there, but sometimes the chalk just gets caught in a deep grain line or something like that. We are there. So I'm pulling this off. What's amazing is this sticky back 3M stuff. This is the same stuff you get from Sumac. What's amazing is that it's totally soft on your tops. It does not pull up fibers like even masking tape. So it works great for this. All right, let's get 120. Check out the chat. Thomas Majierski, always enjoy when I can get the video. Thank you for all the info. What is the grade orientation for the bridge? Okay, yeah, we can talk about that. So the grain, you can see it very clearly on Wengi, which is nice. So first of all, the grain's running this direction, but I don't think that's what you're asking. I think everyone kind of knows that, right? As far as the whether or not it's quarter sawn or flat sawn, this is a quarter sawn bridge, mostly quarter sawn. Actually, this one's very well quarter sawn. Only a little bit of rift in there. I'm not sure if you can see it. If I turn it this way, you can see it better. There you go. So yeah, you could use a flat sawn bridge. but for strength purposes, you get more strength out of the quarter sawn orientation. You could arguably, though, look at it the other way, and that the quarter sawn orientation is going to be more prone to splitting, if that's something you're concerned with. You have your strings subjecting pressure to the saddle. You can imagine splitting this either along the saddle or along the saddle slot or along the bridge pinholes. But hey, that's also why I do this arch bridge pinhole pattern. I don't think you have to do this, but it does. The purpose of the arch pattern is to prevent splits running across all 6 bridge pinholes. You have them all just straight in the line like they are in most bridges, and they're probably all following one grain line. So that's a little bit of a liability. Anyway, lots of ways to think about it, lots of ways to do it. All right, 120. Now you might wonder, why are you using such large pieces of sandpaper? Like, it seems kind of wasteful. And I really just need a piece of sandpaper like right here. It's simply because I don't trust the sandpaper to actually stick down. At the edges, you'll notice it always kind of lifts up slightly. And so if I'm cheap with the sandpaper and I just put just barely enough, I'll actually notice that I'll get these little sort of rounded over edges right at the wings. Okay. So I want to just expand it out so that the portion that's unreliable is completely, away from where I'm working. Like that. So now I'm just sanding to smooth. So this is just going to be like, I don't know, uh, 60 seconds or maybe a minute or 2 minutes of sanding. Right? How you guys doing in the chat? Great invitation with that. Carl Mills. Carl Mills is coming out. I'll see you soon, Carl Mills. He is coming out to my March 28th guitar build workshop. Let's see what he has to say here. Do you check the thickness of each of the bridges to make sure you are not taking more off one end than the other? So, what he's talking about is the thickness. So there, the height. I always call that the height of the bridge. So as you're going to see, I think your question, Carl, is going to be answered in just a little bit here. But I'll give you the rundown right now. The bridge starts out at a certain slightly large height, and then which gives me the leeway to radius it, right? And then even then, it's still going to be slightly tall. And what we're going to do is then take your straight edge, rest it on the fret tops, bring it up like this, and I'm going to take material then off the top of the bridge until this straight edge can go right over it. And actually, I'd like to see a tiny hairline gap underneath the straight edge. I know some people like the straight edge to just be kissing the top. I like the bridge to be even, slightly smaller than that. In the end, trying to think off the top of my head, in the end, the bridges all end up, because my neck set, the pitch of my neck is very dialed in. It always ends up being pretty precisely the same with just a slight amount of fluctuation. That means my bridges always end up being about the same size in the end. But there is still a slight variation, even if it's, uh, you know, 10 or 15 thousandths of an inch between, from one bridge to the next, which is why I don't just simply like, you can imagine on a CNC machine or something, like you just make all your bridges and then you just stick them down, you glue them down the same height. Even Guitars doesn't do that. You know what Martin does? Martin actually has basically a picture like three different bins of different sized bridges to deal with their own fluctuation from what fluctuation isn't the right word, the variability of their neck set from one guitar to the next. Because yes, they have variability as well, even with the process being very controlled. They just have three different bridge sizes. And so, when the guitar is coming down the line and the worker gets the guitar, he just grabs from those bins and finds the bridge that most closely matches the next set. So, by the way, that's another way. I know some good builders who do that same thing. Just have a couple slightly different sized bridges. I think if you have your process really dialed in, the difference from one bridge to the next might only be like a 32nd of an inch. But that does, save you from having to sand each individual one. But hey, we like sanding here, right? Sanding is fun. Sanding, sanding, like that's what I find. Okay, now let's take this one off. I'm going to be a little more careful. This is a different brand of sticky back paper. Not pulling up fibers, but it's leaving behind. That's not bad. It's leaving behind like a little bit of residue. It's not a big deal. All right. Now the final grit. Once again, just like a minute of sanding. We'll get this knocked out. Make sure the ends are all pressed down. Guys, I don't even have Wi-Fi in the shop, and I really need to get that hooked up. I'm live streaming right now off the hard line, like an Ethernet cable that I ran into the shop. But I don't have Wi-Fi, and if I did have Wi-Fi, I could actually watch the stream as we're doing it on my phone, propped in front of me. That way, I'd be able to see your comments. At the moment, I have to stop what I'm doing to check the comments to look over here. Where is that confounded bridge? Who knows where that is from? And any of you guys besides Secret Voice Unlocked, tell me, where is that confounded bridge? I haven't seen the bridge. Have you seen the bridge? Where is that confounded bridge? Who's got it? Give you a clue. It's a song. Oh, beautiful. Speaking of music, can you guys hear the music that I'm playing in the background? I don't think you can. I don't think the mic picks it up. I'm actually jamming out some music here. I think the way that this cardioid mic works, it's only able to um, basically pick up what's right in front of it. So it's omitting all that background noise, which is kind of nice. I can listen to music and not have it, I don't know, affect the stream. Okay, so we've got this ready. What do we want to do next? We are now going to locate the bridge. Okay, I like to use these. You really don't have to use these. If you're on any kind of budget at all, this is like the least necessary tool. Okay, it's kind of gimmicky in a way, but if you have them, you might as well use them. So the way this works is I can set this up for any scale length. Oh, this is called the Saddle-matic, by the way. Might as well tell you what the tool I'm talking about is. I can set this up for any guitar that I'm working on. It could be a repair, it could be a parlor guitar, an OM, simply by resting this block against the nut and then moving this little block until it notches right into the 12th fret. See, there's a little crowned notch on the underside. Fits the fret wire perfectly. And then lock this little knurled knob. Okay, so now it is set for this parlor guitar. And then I'm going to simply lift this up and flip it around and place it back on the 12th fret. So essentially, when it was like this distance from the front of this to the center of this block represents half of our nominal scale length. So when I flip it around like this, now the front edge of this therefore represents our full nominal scale length. Now I keep using that word nominal, which means in name, because we don't want to actually locate our bridge and our saddle based off of just the nominal scale length. We want to locate those based off of the nominal scale length plus compensation. So compensation, kind of a deep topic. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but to encapsulate it a little bit and put it in a nutshell without getting too deep here, it's essentially a lengthening of the scale length, so a lengthening of the speaking length of the strings to account for the fact that in order to play a guitar, we have to press the strings down to the fret wire. The action of pressing the string down to the fret wire actually bends the string slightly and tightens it, right? It puts tension on the string. We know that tension raises the pitch, right? If you turn your tuning keys and add more tension, sharpening the pitch. So you have this natural sharpening effect, especially as you get further into the higher registers of the guitar, because the slope of the strings is slightly higher as we go back here, which requires then slightly more of a press down on the strings, gives you slightly more sharpening. Okay. If we add a tiny amount of string length to the nominal scale length, that has a slight flattening effect. It's not a perfect solution. Nothing here is. It's it's just a mitigating solution. So you're going to, rather than having obvious out of tuneness in certain areas, you're going to distribute out that out of tuneness more evenly across the entire guitar. Okay, let's keep working. Too much chat. Speaking of chat, what's going on in this? I restore older parlor acoustics and replacing a missing bridge on very cool. All right, so we can take this and hold on, I'm looking for something. All right. All right. So we need to locate this. First things first, find the center of the D and the G string. And as you can see, I'm just eyeballing it. When it's a really small distance like that, sometimes it's better just to eyeball that. And if I miss the first time, I'll just fatten the line in the direction that corrects my mistake. So that looks pretty good. And there we go. Now I just want to square my line. Square and work too small. I'm just going to use this as a square. So I'm going to line this up with the front edge. By the way, no one got that confounded bridge quote there. That's a Led Zeppelin song. Can't think of what it's called though. It'll come to me. Not important, but now I can't let go of it. All right, so what I'm doing now is just this is kind of a funky shaped bridge, so sometimes you have a little bit of a challenge here, but the goal is the same regardless of how the bridge is shaped. I'm just trying to get a center line wrapped around the bridge. Find these little tiny, I always call this my baby square. These little baby squares are the most useful size square for guitar making. I've got all these bigger squares, 12-inch squares, and I don't use them for hardly anything. I'm working on the house or something. Okay. All right. There we go. So basically the idea is I want a center line back here and up here so I can line it up with the center of the top. Very simple. And let's go ahead and reclaim the center line on the top. So that is just the jointed line. And if you're really good at book matching your tops, this becomes very challenging to find it again. You can actually see my old pencil line here. So that's helpful. And there. If you just find your jointed line in a couple of places, at least 3 places, you can then connect with a straight edge. And the reason I say at least 3 places is because if your straight edge doesn't line up with one of those 3, then you know that you marked the wrong place for at least one of them. And that gives you an opportunity to double check and fix it. Whereas if you just did two marks, one here and one there, if either one of these two marks is on a grain line adjacent to the center, very easy to do, well, then your whole center line is going to be off and you'll never know. Okay, there we go. All my marks lined up. Nice and gentle. We don't need to dig into the top at this stage with the pencil. Giving it the eyeball test. It looks good. Check out the chat. Okay, you guys are chilling. All right, so let's line this up. So I got this set up. Resting on the 12th fret. Slide the bridge forward until these little pincers. Oh, I had started to talk about compensation and then never got to the point of why I was talking about that. So the front face of this represents the full nominal scale length, right? So these little pincers then represent the tiny amount of added compensation. Okay. You can see the one pincer is on the bass side and it's sticking out much further, and the other one is on the treble side. It's barely sticking out at all. And that's because the wound strings, bass strings, require more compensation than the treble strings, the plain steel wound strings. Again, another sort of deep topic we can get into another time. But anyway, I'm going to line up those pincers because that's where I actually want the saddle slot to be. Now, in this case, I have them set up to represent the front edge of the saddle slot, not the center of the saddle slot. Don't get tripped up by that. But that's just a small detail. You can set those pincers up either way. Set this exactly where I like to see the front edge of the saddle slot. You don't want to be too close to the front edge of the bridge because then your saddle, which has pressure on it, forward pressure from the strings pushing against it, you can actually snap and crack the bridge in the front if your saddle slot is too close to the edge. Alternatively, if you're too close to the bridge pinholes, well, now you're just going to have undue pressure on your saddle because the angle that the string climbs to reach the top of the saddle is going to be very extreme if the saddle is very close to the bridge pinholes. Now I know everybody wants numbers here. If you basically just aim for your saddle slot to be in the middle of that space between the bridge pinholes and the front edge of the bridge, can't go wrong there. In my online course, I actually have numbers, basically stay this far off the front edge of the bridge, this far off the bridge pinholes. But honestly, I've been eyeballing this for so long that I don't recall off the top of my head what they are. But I set this up and then I'll actually check it and tell you. And right there looks good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift this up without accidentally moving the bridge. And then I'm going to turn my attention to that center line and just make sure that that's lined up. Okay, good over there. Good over here. Looking good. Pick this up again if I want and just double check. Make sure I didn't lose my front to back positioning in the process. Nope, that looks really good. Since I love where it's at right now, before I do anything else, I'm going to very gently trace the outline of the bridge. So if I do kind of slip up and lose it, it doesn't matter. I still permanently have it on the pencil. So you work very gently, because at this stage, again, we don't want to dig into the top, especially right around the edge of the bridge. You'll see that after you glue it down, and you'll never be able to clean that up later if you do a nice deep arc with the pencil. Essentially because when you glue it, the glue squeeze out will actually seal over your pencil mark to get permanent. So before we glue this, we're gonna erase that. All right, but now the real thing that sets our location more permanently is going to be drilling through the two E string holes. Lined up. I'm going to place this clamp in here. I'm assuming that this fits in my tiny Parlor guitars. Yeah, that fits. These these Parlor guitars are a bit new here, so sometimes they have to be creative on the fly. Okay. On the lower jaw of this clamp, I don't know if you saw, I have a little piece of wood, just a simple caul taped to the lower jaw, and that's just so that I can get this over top of the X brace and still be able to clamp it down without the jaw, without the X brace interfering with the lower jaw. Here, I'll show you. Just because I have another one for the other students. See, you don't need to buy a specific type of clamp for this because I know they make stuff like this. You could, this is a permanent tool at this point. They've never taken that tape off. Um, Very simple. Checking everything. Okay. Since this clamp just reaches, and make sure it's tight, so it's not waffling around. We are ready, almost ready to drill. So I've got a 3/16 of an inch bit for my 3/16 of an inch holes. Yep. See, I think the chuck might, yeah, this is going to get in the way. So I have to grab I have another drill downstairs that has a smaller chuck. So I'm going to go grab that. You guys don't go anywhere. It'll take me 10 seconds. Right. Back. That took me only slightly more than 10 seconds, right? All right, so what's going on in the chat, guys? What do you got? Nothing? See, there's 23 of you. Someone's uh, someone's got to have a question or a comment there. Let's keep chatting. What you guys got? All right, so this is actually an old plug-in drill. I pretty much only use for this one purpose, which is drilling these, simply because my battery powered drills, the chuck is a little larger, and so I can't quite get it in there. Good thing when I bought those, I never got rid of these old school corded drills. All right. Ah, the chuck still hits it there. Look at that. These bridges are a little different than the usual bridge, so I'm running into some issues here. I think if I just extend out a little further, there we go. Now, if I hold this drill, really rigidly, I might be holding it at a slight angle like this. It's an extreme angle, but I might be holding it at a slight angle. And so if I grip this really tightly, I'm going to hold that angle and go all the way through. However, if I hold it very loosely, at least at the start, it'll center it. The drill will right itself if I let it, just like that. And now it's straight up and down. And I have to be very aware um, that this is only holding the bridge at one point in the middle. So it's possible for the bridge to pivot about that one point, but I always do it this way because it usually doesn't. So just be aware of that. Okay? And the name of the game here is high speed, low pressure. There's nothing backing up the wood on the other side. It's just an open cavity, right? So what you want to do with the drill is set it to a relatively high speed and no down pressure. I'm not actually pushing it through the cut. I'm just pumping the trigger and just letting it work its way through kind of slowly. And that way you get less or no tear out on the other side. Now, of course, there's ways I've seen people like fastening blocks under there to try and deal with this, and usually it doesn't work. And you don't need to, because all you need to do is know how to work your drill appropriately for those situations. And again, it's high speed, low pressure. Okay, so these two marks are what now give us our precise location. The pencil marks that we have everywhere don't matter anymore. And in fact, we should erase them. And then we're going to sand the surface to make it smooth for the glue up. Now you might think, well, if I'm sanding it, why bother erasing them? I don't know if you guys have noticed this before, but sanding pencil marks off of wood, somehow the pencil marks seem to magically uh, never go away. That's what I always find. Maybe it's the type of woods I use. So if I simply erase them first, they go away much quicker. Not, standing forever just to get through my pencil marks. Okay. All right, I've got 220 grit on this block. This paper's pretty old though. We do have new paper. Yes, I do. So this, I'm just going to start at 220 here because this has already been sanded 120 with the random orbital sander. Just take that. And I'm cleaning this up for the purposes of the glue joint, but I might as well also extend my strokes to include basically the whole lower bout because it's going to be just a little bit harder to finish sand these areas when the bridge is in my way. Might as well do it now. What's going on in the chat, guys? Not quiet. Nobody wants to look up that Led Zeppelin song for me. It has the word south in it. All right. Forget you guys. I'm looking it up. Let's see. The Crunch. That's it. I thought it had the word south in it. It's called The Crunch. Very funky jam. I love that song. Anyway, that's where the bridge comment came from. In case you were wondering. Landing with the grain, of course. All right. Let's erase these pencil lines. Bridge. Then we are going to get the oils off the bridge. So I'm going to wipe this down with first mineral spirits and then naphtha. You don't need to do this with all wood or any material, just exceptionally oily woods. Actually, I don't think Wengi would fall into the category of exceptionally oily, but I do believe it's on the oily side. But yeah, anything like a rosewood or an ebony, you want to wipe it down with the mineral spirits. The mineral spirits will remove the oils. And then the naphtha actually just cleans up the mineral spirits quicker than the mineral spirits and just waiting for the mineral spirits to flash off. The beauty of naphtha is it's a solvent, so it'll clean it up, but then it will simply evaporate very quickly. You're not sitting around waiting forever for the solvent to wick off before you actually start applying glue. All right, let me go get those solvents. 10 seconds. Time. All right, I want to show you this, guys. I know my space is getting very crowded here, but I wanted to bring these over here just to show you. Found these online, Amazon. Can't tilt it to show you the words here because it'll spill out. But these Just Right plunger cans, man, they were expensive. So not for everyone. I hate how expensive they are. Honestly, just because of like probably uh, relationships they have with different OSHA regulators and things like that. Um, so these were like 75 bucks or something. I don't remember exactly. It was insane. But they are amazing little dispenser devices. Whatever you call them. Because instead of taking the jar and dumping it, putting this over the jar, you wouldn't dump it, of course. Putting this over the mouth of the jar and doing this shaker thing. Rather, you take this, and so this one's my mineral spirits, and you just gently push on that plunger. super clean, free, never making a mess. Super expensive, unnecessarily expensive, stupid expensive. Because they know certain people will buy them just because they're operating like a school or something like that, and they need to do some sort of meet certain safety requirements, right? All right, so you just wipe down the glue surface, just like that. And then, as promised, here I can just use a dry portion of this rag. We're going to then use naphtha. So once again, I press down on that plunger, just soaks up into the rag. All right, that's a nice clean surface. Now, the last little bit of safety advice I have for you is don't do this. Don't ball these up and then throw them in the corner because these will catch on fire and burn your whole shop down and burn your life. At the very least, if you don't dispose of them properly, don't at the very least don't ball them up. You're better off being like this. You ball them up. It's very easy for them to spontaneously generate heat and things like that. Them open, which allows them to air out and allows the material, the solvent, to wick off, thus saving your shop. But I also have cans. I can't really show you on the camera, but the same company that makes these cans for disposing rags like that. For safe. And as you can see, the solvent has wicked off. We are almost ready for an actual glue up, guys. Oh wait, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because we haven't checked the height of this, like I said I would. That's very important because it's easier to thickness this now than it is possible to do it after I glue it down, but I'd rather not do it right over top of the guitar. Rather, I can check the height of this and then just sand the top on the sanding board until it's just right. Okay, straight edge. Going on. All right, I got my straight edge. Knock that out of the way. And I'm going to place the bridge right over those pinholes. Uh, yeah, pinholes. And I'm going to check the height by simply resting straight edge on the fret tops and sliding it until it bumps into the bridge. And actually, I am just kissing over the top of the bridge. So this is actually about where I want it. I like to see a little gap under the straight edge, 64th to even a 32nd of an inch of a gap under the straight edge. A lot of people set this up so the straight edge just kisses over the top. I like to see a little hairline gap. So I'm going to sand this just a hair to get that gap. Here, I'll trim this up and maybe you can see, hey guys, maybe you can see a little bit over here. Got my sanding wheel over here. I'm sanding off the top of the bridge. That's important. The bottom of the bridge is already perfectly radius and smooth. It doesn't need much. That'll probably do it right there. Here, I'm going to hit it on the smoother too. So I went 80 to 120. place this back on here. Yep, bingo. I'd say I've got a 32nd of an inch, maybe slightly less than a 32nd of an inch. And that's what I want. All right, so we are ready to glue this. Let's grab all the things we need. So let me talk about this right here. So this is a Fox style bridge clamp. This is one I made myself. Let me get you the commercial version of this. Let's see. Let me check the chat. Oh, let me fix my camera. Nothing going on in the chat. So this is a commercial version of a Fox style bridge clamp. Here's what I don't like about these. One, you don't need to buy this. You can make it very easily. Two, the screws that come down on the wings right here. You know, the idea of this whole thing is you screw this through your bridge. Those bolts go through the bridge, and these knurled knobs get tightened down on the underside against the bridge plate. And that's what clamps the center portion of the bridge in place. And then these come down and they put gentle pressure on the wings to make sure that those seal down as well. And these work okay. I do still use them for garden style bridges. Although if I ever have the time to get around to it, I'd prefer to make my own version of this. Because the one thing I don't like is there should be 2 points of pressure in the wings, not one. If you put 1 point of pressure on anything, it's going to cause the outside edges to flare up. So this would just be, I think, better design if they made it a little wider and so that they could have room for not one of these, but two. So that's what I've done here. All of this is designed for my, to fit these silly mustache-shaped bridges. But also you can see, got 2 points of pressure on each wing. Now let's talk about how to make this. It's very simple. You need a good hardwood for this because you don't want to split it when you're making it or um, putting it under pressure by using it. This piece in particular, I can tell this is Cataloche, but it doesn't really matter too much. You could use a piece of oak. And just simply using the same hardware that I used for my bolt-on mortise and tenon. So I've got knife threaded inserts and then bolts that run through them. And then I actually just added these little caps here. You don't need these. I've used these dozens of times just with the end of the screw putting pressure, and it leaves a tiny mark that you can just sand off after the fact. But I got sick of sanding off that mark, so today we're going to try it with these caps. So I haven't used these caps. These are the same caps that you find on Go bars. Okay, so we were actually talking about that in the past Q&A. Get these at the hardware store too. Good. Type on. All right, so we've got two bolts and two knurled knobs for the underside. The only reason these bolts look different is because the cap broke off of this one. So for this one, I'm just going to have to use a these run through there, and then we're going to put the bridge on, and I'm going to thread. These bolts are sized to be able to thread right into that hole, string hole. And I want to thread this, for now I want to thread this so that it still sits just below. Give me 1 second, guys. Almost forgot that I hadn't dipped these in paste wax first. Always dip these in paste wax. And I'm very careful not to get the paste wax on my fingers. The last thing I want to do is get the paste wax on the glue surface. Yep. So I'm just going to thread that in until it's just below the surface. The reason I want it just below the surface is because when I spread my glue on the surface, I don't want to accidentally pick up a little bit of the paste wax from the bolt and get it mixed into my glue. So the whole purpose of the paste wax here is to resist the glue. It's going to keep these bolts, which are going to stay in here, it's going to keep them from getting permanently glued into place. Very important. We're also going to wax up the bottom of these. Just like that. Guys, we are ready to go. I can feel just a slight, must have gotten on my fingers, a slight waxiness. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Give me a couple seconds. I'll be right back. Nothing gets shit off your hands like Gojo. You guys ever use that stuff? You know, the orange, like auto mechanics and people who deal with oil a lot use Gojo. Yeah, we're ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and spread our glue. Glue bottle's a little blocked up. I always keep just these little finish nails here. You don't want to be too overzealous with the glue here. Let's try spreading that around. As always, you got to have enough glue. So I'm not afraid to get a little squeeze out. I just don't want to get massive gobs of squeeze out. Right around with your pinky. Whenever I'm doing the bridge, because the bridge is really important to keep clean. Um, Always leave a little margin around the edges. See that? You see how I'm not pushing it right up against the edge as much as I can help it? Leave that little margin until the very end. That's pretty good. Good. And then right before I stick this down, I'm just going to dab my pinky all around that edge. And it leaves sort of this like stucco, dappled, stucco-like um, effect. And that I find gives you really good control over your squeeze out. Don't do this with everything, just on the bridge and the fretboard tongue where it really matters. Now this next part, what I call sticking the landing. So I'm going to poke these out. Okay, do that. Got my bolts sticking out. And I'm going to try and get this right on the holes. Not a big deal if you don't get it right on the holes. That just means you're going to smear across the wood a little bit, which is just more for you to clean up. Boom. Stuck it. Perfect. Thread the end. Should have given me an Allen wrench for this ready, but that's okay. I can see them. I think that'll hold up too much. Now, as I'm tightening this down, I want to make sure that these two things are centered, or not centered, but are positioned exactly where I want them over the wings, right about there. Here's the part you always got to practice, probably many times before you do this for the first time. And that's getting these knobs on there. Now I've done this so many times that just muscle memory, I know exactly where to reach for. But I know, especially when I've students here in class, this is something, if you haven't done this before, really hard first time to actually find those bolts. So dry run, dry run, dry run. If you're doing this for the first time, do several dry runs before you commit with the glue. You don't be fishing around for 20 minutes trying to find these bolts. Okay, those are on there. I'm gonna tighten them down. Holding on to that knurled knob from the inside as I'm tightening it. Otherwise, it'll just spin in place. Okay, good. Now these, and you know what? I'm going to turn this up like this, and I think maybe you guys can see a little better what I'm doing. So I'm just going to turn these down. Now here's the deal, guys. Less is more here. Um, what I do is I turn these and I actually watch the mating surface of the wing very closely, and I watch it close up. And once it pushes against the soundboard and seals up, I might continue to turn it like a hair, but that's it. Just stop there because you're not actually helping by continuing to put pressure on that. What you're actually doing, if you think about it, that pressure has to go somewhere. Yeah, you could like crack or damage the top. I'm sure that's possible, though I've never seen it. But actually, more commonly, what happens is you actually force a gap further back. Because again, it's got to go somewhere. Once you see this closed up, then it's good. It's a little tight. I need a better system for these Allen wrenches. And that's it, guys. There we go. There we go. Yeah, this one's just tight for whatever reason. But again, I'm not cranking this. I'm actually watching the wing get pushed down, and watching it meet the soundboard, and then know I'm good. Okay. And you can see we got minimal squeeze out, a little right over there. When you get these little orbs, these little balls of squeeze out, that's ideal. You don't want to see these big gooey mounds. When you go to clean that up, it's just going to spread everywhere. Those little orbs will just kind of keep right off. Yep, we got along the back, a little bit more over here. So that I got to be careful picking up. The rest of this is gonna just kind of peel right off like leather. Okay, do we have any questions at the moment? I don't think so. I don't see any. So that's it. We got this glued up. If you like what I do and you get a little something out of these live streams, check out EricSchaeferGuitars.com. We got endless library of free videos there, but I also have the online course building an OM acoustic. Um, so that's a paid course, 61 videos taking you through every step of the build, including this one we just did in crazy detail. And also the hands-on workshops. So you can come out here. We've got the spring workshops starting very soon. And then we'll have more workshops in the summer and usually have a whole bunch of workshops in the fall. So that's in Robustonia, Pennsylvania. Lastly, if you want to buy some wood for your next project, EricSchaeferGuitars.com. Check out the Tone Wood Shop. We've got some cool stuff and more stuff coming out all the time. All right, guys. I thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.